Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for tuning in to Blender Studio S. Today, I'll be going over this text effect, which I call Swarm Morph. As you can see, text will break apart into small particles and regroup to form another. By the way, if you have trypophobia or collective phobia, this tutorial might not be for you. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so for this effect, I've already uploaded a video for Morph Effect and also Dissolve Effect, which are going to be the two effects that I'm going to be combining to make this effect. So I'm not going to go in full detail about why I'm doing certain operation, but I will show you how to make it, okay? So let's get right into it. Go into Geometry Nodes Layout, A to select everything, X to delete, Shift A, add mesh plane, go into top orthographic view, click on new, delete group input, add a string input instead. And for this, I'm going to be using multiple lines, so I'm going to input something like Tom/n, Bob/n, and cat. Something like that, okay? I'm gonna pass it through a replace string. I'm gonna find a /n and replace it with a line break, like so. And I'm gonna pass it through a strings to curve. Okay, so now I got these three lines, and as soon as I do this, I'm actually gonna separate these lines with separate geometry. Use instance, and I'm going to use a compare equal from the line ID and pass it through like this. Okay, so if I look at this output, it's just going to be Tom. Right, so next I'm going to be instancing points on, well, the surface of these letters. To do that, I have to have a first bounding box, then grid, then points. So from here, I'm gonna realize instance, use a bounding box. From max, use a vector mass, change it to subtract min from max to get the dimensions, separate x, y, z. Then I'm gonna have a grid coming out of here. Plug in x and y to size x and y. And now I have a grid like this with a dimension of the text. Next, I'm going to add a value node to control the resolution of the points or particles. So I'm actually going to put in 0.01, which is 1 centimeter in here. Then I'm going to calculate how many vertices I need from this. I'm going to duplicate the subtract, change it to divide. Divide the result of subtract by this resolution value. Add 1. Then separate x, y, z, like so. And these are going to be the vertices values, x and y. Okay, so now I have a grid like this with 1 centimeter in width for a grid. What I'm going to do is recenter it so it covers the text. I'm going to duplicate the subtract with Control-Shift-D with lines. Change the subtract to add. Vector mass scale. Scale it by 0.5. And from the grid, I'm going to use a transform geometry, and I'm going to plug the scale value into translation, like so. So now I have this covering the text itself, like so. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to do is instance on points right here, and I am gonna project this letter, which is here. but I first need to fill. So I'm gonna use fill curve. Then I'm gonna raycast. Then I'm gonna plug the is hit into selection like so. Okay. And what I'm gonna instance on points is actually points. It's kind of counterintuitive, but I'm actually converting mesh into point clouds right here. I'm gonna actually set the radius, although it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna multiply the resolution by 0.5 and set it as radius. Plug in the geometry to the instance, like so, okay? I'm gonna actually, okay. All right. So if I look right now, we got all these points covering the surface of Tom, like this, okay? Great. So I'm gonna realize instance after here. So I make it all into point cloud points. I'm actually gonna hide these guys. All right. So I'm gonna pull this value all the way over here, and I'm gonna select from the leftmost realized instance to the right realized instance, from here to here, okay? And I'm gonna Control G to make it into a group. Open up the side panel with N, and I'm gonna change this input name to resolution. All right, hop back out. I'm gonna change this node group name to convert text to points. Great. So I got Tom with points. So what I'm gonna do is actually duplicate all three of these nodes using Control-Shift-D with lines attached and bring it down here. I'm gonna reroute like this. It's kind of cleaner. Okay. All right. So if I were to change this index value right here to 1 and output this, now I get Bob, right? So Tom and Bob, just like that. I actually want to keep it in the same location. So what I'm going to do is go back to the strings to curve, change the line spacing to 0, change the horizontal alignment to center. So if I change between Tom and Bob, it stays in relatively the same location. Okay. And with that being done, I want to get into the morphing part. So in order to morph correctly, I need to have this point value, right? Number of points between these two match. So Bob right now has 3.6K, Tom has 3100, okay? So I want to make sure that Tom has sufficient. Well, I want to add more points to Tom, so it's going to match Bob, right? So what I'm going to do is use a domain size, change this to point. I'm going to duplicate right here, use it right there as well. And what I'm going to do is use a max to get the maximum number of points that we need between these two meshes. Well, between these two letters. Then what I'm going to do is find the difference between the required points and the actual point count. And I'm going to make this into a node group. So I'm only going to do it with Tom, but I'm going to copy it to Bob as well. Okay. So after I subtract, what I'm going to do is duplicate this and actually divide this count by the point count. Okay, divide the difference with the point count. After this divide, what I'm going to do is use a repeat zone. So I'm going to add a repeat zone here, use a join geometry, and I'm going to pull in this Tom into geometry first. Then I'm going to pull this same line and add it into join geometry as well. And I'm going to get the result of divide and put it into iteration. What this does is if the difference is much more than well, the number of points Tom provides, Tom is going to replicate itself as many times as it needs. Okay, so say for example the point that's required to fill is about 10k. Tom has to replicate itself 3 times, right? So that's what this part does. I'm going to Control Shift D and duplicate and bring this divide down. I'm going to change divide to floored module. Bring out this domain size and use a subtract and subtract the point count from floored module. Next, I'm going to pull out the geometry, use a separate geometry right here. And I'm going to get the selection, pull it out, get a greater than or equal. And I'm going to compare the index with the result of the subtract. Okay, so what this part does is, say for example, well, in this case, we need about 500 more points in order for Tom to match Bob. So what it's going to do is it's going to select 500 from the right side. So maybe about this much, or maybe about this much, and it's going to duplicate it, right? So I'm going to join these two, and if I take a look right now, this Tom now has 3,600 points and ends with 3605 as last index of points, just as the same as Bob, which is 3,600 points. And if you remember correctly, Tom only had 3,100 points, like so. So now I've successfully matched the number of points with Tom and Bob. So I'm gonna actually go from here, the subtract to join geometry. Control G, make it into a group. I'm actually going to reorder the input, and the second value should be points required, and the third point is going to be point count, and these are both integers. So I'm going to change the data type as well. All right, now I'm going to hop back out, change the name to add extra points, and I'm going to duplicate this and bring it down here as well. Okay, and I'm going to connect this, and that. So now we have 2 point clouds on the text with the same amount of points. I'm actually going to make another point cloud, which I'm going to use points right here and use the maximum number as count. And actually, I'm going to match the radius, so it looks okay. And I'm actually going to use this object as a transformation object. Okay, so I'm going to pull out a set position right here. And what position do I want? Well, I want to sample these guys, right? These locations. So what I'm going to do is use the sample index, change it to vector, and what I'm going to sample is position for each index. Okay, so plug it in like so, and I'm going to duplicate these 3 and bring it down, and I'm going to sample Bob as well, like so. Now I'm going to mix those 2 vectors like this and plug it in. So now I end up with this, right? So if I change the factor now, I can switch from Tom to Bob, Tom to Bob, like that. Cool. Now I'm gonna actually pull out a line from here and attach a scene time seconds here, so I can use this to animate, and I'm gonna pull it all the way over here. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do from here is I'm gonna use the scene time and control these index or indices that selects which line we're picking. So from seconds, I'm gonna pull out a floor and plug this in here. From the result of floor, I'm gonna add, and I'm gonna change the value to 1, and I'm gonna add that to here. And also what I need is I'm gonna get a reroute and go all the way here, and I'm gonna duplicate this add, change it into a fraction, and pop it into here. So the second goes into fraction, fraction goes into the factor of mix, like that. Okay. This part is a bit complicated, so seconds to floor, floor to the top equal, floor then add to the bottom equal. Okay. Now if I were to run the animation, it goes from Tom, Bob, and Cat, like that. While I'm at it, I'm actually gonna make it loop forever. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna pull out a attribute statistics from here and connect the line ID to attribute, change point to instance, and by adding 1 to the maximum of line index, what I get is how many lines I have, basically the line count. So what I'm gonna do now is add a modulo right here, floored modulo, here and here. Okay. And do a modulo using this result of add. Okay. So now if I were to run this, it's going to run forever. So going from Tom, Bob, Cat, Tom, Bob, Cat. So I'm just going to extend the animation time to basically forever. Okay. All right. I'm just going to keep on running this while I'm working on it. So let's slow down this animation by adding a multiply here. I'm gonna multiply the seconds by a small number to make it slow down. And since it's kind of hard to tell because it's a uniform speed, I'm gonna actually change the speed by using a float curve over here, right in between fraction and mix. Okay. And I'm gonna shape the float curve like this, so the text is more defined, right? So the transition is kind of faster, but text is more defined. It's going to take a little bit more time to display the text. Okay, cool. So we pretty much got the basics down, but it looks a little bit boring because it kind of looks like marching band, right? Nothing really too exciting. Not saying marching band isn't exciting, but so what I like to do is add a little bit of noise to this. Okay, so I'm gonna put in a noise texture, change the dimensions to 2D because I don't need 3 for this. I'm gonna plug this result of mix into vector right here. From color, I'm going to use a vector mass, change it to subtract 0.5 to recenter, and I'm going to add another vector mass, change it to multiply, multiply by 1, 1, 0 to basically constrain it to XY axes. And I'm gonna use a scale. Okay. And let's just plug this into offset right now and see what happens. So I get this huge mess, which is kind of cool, but that's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is pull out a line from the result of fraction. I'm going to pull it out from here and use another float curve. And I'm going to shape it like this, okay? So I'm going to add 3 points. Shape it kind of like this. Okay. And I'm going to plug it into scale like so. And now what you see is that between the letters, while it's transitioning, it has a noise on it, and it looks like it's doing a little bit more interesting stuff. While I'm at it, I'm going to add a mask node, change it to multiply, put it in here as a basic noise volume control. 0.5 seems good, and depending on what kind of noise texture you put on here, the look is going to be pretty different. What I like, the looks that I like is detail of 0. The noise is a little bit more orderly, I guess. So it has noise on it, but it looks like all the points are kind of in sync. Whereas if you were to, say, turn up the distortion, you'll have this huge mess. But go for whatever look you like. I'm just gonna go with 500, which is kind of this look. Okay. Cool. We're pretty much done. What needs to be done now is instance on points, and you can instance pretty much whatever you like, but I'm gonna go with grid, and I'm actually gonna bring this resolution value into size X and Y, so it fits perfectly. Change the vertices count to 2, and then pop it in here. All right. So now we get this, well, it's a little bit chunky and blocky, but this, well, swarm morphing effect, right? If we were to turn up the resolution or make it smaller, you will get a little bit more defined text and smaller particles. But of course, processing is going to take a little bit longer, and if you go too low, it's not going to look like there's particles. It just looks a little bit more like a smidge. So kind of decide on what kind of look you would like. Okay, right. I'm just going to set a material right here. Material. Pull out a shader editor. Use the default material, and I'm going to use an RGB directly. Use a simple black and white. I like that. And let's see. Now I'm actually going to change the font as well. What's a good one? Something like this, maybe. 0.5. All right. I'm gonna change it to rendered and take a look. All right. Final result kind of looks like this. Looks okay. Of course, it's gonna look better with actual rendering, but yeah, you can, if you take a closer look, you can see all the particles shifting around, and that's kind of cool. Okay, so let's look at what we've done. I'm not gonna re-explain everything, but I will show you all the node tree from left to right so you can check the connections and values. So going from left to right, kind of like this. And also inside the node groups, this one is convert text to points. And this one is add extra points. It's kind of hard to see. I hope you can make it out. But yeah, this is basically it. Alright, so just like that, this is how you make this swarm morph effect. Thank you for watching the tutorial. I hope you learned something new. I actually came up with this effect while making tutorials for dissolve and morph effect. I just started modifying the node tree on the spot to make this new swarm morph. I think this freedom to customize and create is what makes geometry nodes great. So, I hope you also take it beyond just making what is shown on the tutorial, but customize them to your liking as well. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.